Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Howdy do.
That's what you go with for this. Also, I can't help but notice that Tim has styled his beard a little bit into more of a goatee. Was this a concentrated effort?
No, I was on a friend's show yesterday and I was playing the devil, so I just gave myself a more devil-like facial hair.
Good to know. Goatees are devilish. So this is a horror movie podcast. We get together and we talk about a film we've watched. It's really that simple. And it is Vampire Month here in January of what is hopefully a better year of 2021. I say that because we're recording these in advance because Tim should be either already on paternity leave by now or about to be on paternity leave. So, but we are here today to talk about Fright Night, the original Fright Night from 1985. Kind of one of the probably most known 80s vampire movies that, for whatever reason, we haven't gotten to yet. And we're going to dive in and talk about it. I'd only seen this once before. I saw it when I was a teenager, which sadly was probably about 15 years ago now, which maybe tells you my age. So is this one you've seen a lot? Is this one you grew up watching?
Surprisingly not a lot. I'm not sure what it is about this one because for some people it's like a seminal classic that they grew up on, and I don't know, it was just one of those weird ones that like I wasn't actively avoiding, but I don't know, never got around to it. Like I remember the box art very vividly, like from perusing movie store shelves and stuff, and I think at some point I just got it in my head. I don't know why. Maybe I heard it somewhere, or maybe just like lack of seeing it around, and or the fact that I never really saw it on TV or anything. But I think at some point I got it into my head that like it wasn't very good. And then I probably watched it for the first time like maybe in my 20s or something, and was like, oh, this is actually like pretty fun, and it kind of has like a cult following and stuff. It's yeah, and then I wouldn't say that it's something I've watched like a lot since then. Like, I've seen it a handful of times now at this point. I have the Blu-ray and everything. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a weird one. I'm kind of surprised that like it's not a little bigger, because it is definitely like horror fans. I feel like it's one that people know and talk about, but it still feels like pretty cult-like to me, at least. I don't know.
Yeah, like I say, I saw it when I was a teenager, and I have to admit, I don't remember actually loving it that much as a teenager, and I don't know what about it at the time did that. I mean, I'll reveal in a second how I felt on this watch, but just to make it clear, we will start spoiler-free, and we'll give you warning before we get the spoilers. The basic premise of the movie, it's a little... I don't know, it's not exactly Rear Window-esque, but it's kind of like teenager, in his house, notices that his new neighbour's a bit creepy and suspects very quickly that he might be a vampire, and very quickly crosses paths.
With good cause.
With reasonable cause past a certain point, yes. But he eventually crosses paths with him and becomes kind of in danger from this. I mean, I know it's a spoiler to say that he is a vampire. That's not... The movie doesn't treat it like a mystery. Sure. It's very quickly established that he's definitely a vampire. And then it's about him reaching out to this aging actor, clearly inspired by like a Peter Cushing cross with Vincent Price style of thespian from all these old horror movies that he watches on TV to try and help him take on the vampire. So plus it has Marcy from Married with Children.
Yeah,
in it,
it's so weird.
as the teen love interest, which is surreal. So there you go. It's also worth mentioning that the aging actor in question, whose character's name is Peter Vincent. So again, I said Peter Cushing and Vincent Price. I don't think that name's an accident.
Sure.
In that sense. But he's played by Roddy McDowall, who you might know as Cornelius from the Planet of the Apes movies,
of course,
the original ones. So, no, it's just stuff. So yeah, I mean, you kind of already answered the question, if you liked it or not. So maybe I'll just skip to me. But I had fun with it. There's a lot of fun to be had here. It's definitely better than I remembered it being, with one very large caveat.
Interesting. Okay.
there's one very large caveat, and his name is Ed.
Ed. Yeah, I think that's going to kind of swing either way for most people. You're probably going to either find him intolerable or, the highlight of the movie.
I think that Franklin from Texas Chainsaw Massacre has some competition, is what I'm saying, for being just an absurdly annoying character. His laughingness, his high-pitched voice, the way he questions things, everything about him absolutely drove me nuts. I hated him every time he was on screen.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, he probably has, like, the most iconic line, like, from the movie, like, the thing that people usually quote, which I was going to say off the top of the show, but I don't think I can capture, Evil's voice. Like, it's, I don't know, I don't even really know how to describe it. It is, like, very grating, but yeah, it's, he's definitely a character in this, for sure. I'm still not sure if he's supposed to be friends with, the main character. The main character that's Charlie, I believe.
Charlie, yeah, Charlie's the main one.
So I'm still not sure if are they actually friends, or is he just like kind of a loser who doesn't really have anyone that just kind of pops up and inserts themselves into like their lives.
Yeah, Joe, it sounds to me like when he talks, he kind of sounds like a really annoying cartoon character. He's so animated with the way he talks, and it's really annoying. It's like, hey, Charlie, and it's just like I can't even do the high pitched laugh.
Yeah, everything is like it's like really drawn out. It's like, like
there you go. Yeah, that was a good noise. That was a noise that encapsulated the experience of Evil Ed.
But I will admit, like I guess I kind of waffle a bit. Like I do think he's annoying, but there's some stuff that's like so over the top. I think it's kind of funny, but there is some stuff with him towards the end that I actually do feel is, despite how annoying he is, I feel like is kind of touching a little bit. But yeah, let's save that for spoilers. yes,
I'm very curious. Yeah, I will say probably the biggest star of this movie for me is actually, I noticed the name in the credits, but the music is composed by Brad Fiedel, who went on to do, well, he'd already done Terminator 1 and he went on to do Terminator 2, the music. Okay. And I actually do think the music in this is really good. It's a little in your face, don't get me wrong. Almost any time Jerry, the vampire. I don't know why I said Jerry, I think of Jerry Seinfeld. No, I'm just thinking of Jerry Seinfeld as a vampire. But
it doesn't sound like a very vampire name.
It doesn't, no. But anytime like he appears or he's staring at someone, like this like pulsing bass and electric guitar come in, and I'm like, okay, this sounds great. This is kind of the era stuff that I'm kind of here for. No, I mean I have fun with the movie. There's a lot of good moments. There's some laughs to be had along the way. I do think it has kind of a weird thing where I don't know if I necessarily like Charlie that much either. He's not actively annoying. Yeah. He's not annoying like Evil Ed is. It's not the same thing. It's just in the sense that I don't know how like ultimately sympathetic he is. He's kind of a dick in a lot of ways. Oh sure, yeah, and I feel like the movie starts pretty quickly to the point where I feel like you don't really get a super great grasp on who he is as a character, because it's almost like instant that he's entwined in this vampire stuff. So I mean, all we know is that like he's paranoid about vampires, but yeah, I guess the only other really character thing we get is that he's like kind of pressuring his girlfriend like to have sex, like which isn't necessarily the most likable thing right out of the gate. But it's not even just that. Like he has like moments where he just straight up becomes like a peeping tom at a couple of moments, or there's other beats where he'll dare say something. It never goes like too absurdly extreme. Don't get me wrong. He never like crosses like super extreme lines, but it's kind of this weird thing where I get that a lot of this stuff is like 80s kind of tropes, and like a lot of this behavior from teenagers, especially in the 80s, was kind of like on screen considered completely like acceptable. But there's just enough little things there where I don't think Charlie came across as a super likable guy. And even likewise, even the love interest Amy, played by Marcy from Married with Children, even she comes across as a little bit one note, where she's just constantly annoyed that he's not paying attention to her and he's paying attention to vampires and like conspiracy theories instead.
Yeah, there was like a couple of like really annoying parts where like he like they would be talking and then like his interest would get piqued somewhere else, like a something odd is happening, and then he would go to check it out and then she would get mad. But it's that kind of annoying thing where it's like no one's talking to each other. Like
Mm-hmm.
he just needs to be like, hey, listen, I understand that you're here and what you're saying is important, but also please understand that I am going through some really weird stuff right now and I need to pay attention to this. Like, but instead it is like, yeah, the very typical like, oh, you man kind of
Yeah.
like reaction a lot of times.
Yeah, so if I have a complaint, a kind of a broad stroke complaint, that is, although because obviously my first complaint is Evil Ed is annoying as shit, is that the characters aren't super like likable or that I want to root for, which is a big difference from other 80s movies where I do super love the characters and I do want to root for, say, I don't know, I mean, I'm just trying to think of a vampire movie, I guess Near Dark, but even taking away vampires, like think of something like, Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that, where I'm rooting for the characters because I like the main character, or
Sure.
Dream Warriors even more so, where I like the whole group of characters. This is maybe the one thing that feels like it's missing from this, because otherwise it has all of the vibes of a movie of that era. It has the music, it has the kind of the 80s style, it has kind of some fun cheesy elements. It has, I was kind of joking at one point that when the vampire Jerry's like sort of like he's glamoring people by staring at them, I was kind of saying, oh, this is kind of a weird, like like obviously this is what like the staring in Twilight is based on, is not this movie specifically but just in general the idea of like glamoring the victim so they're in a trance before you like strike. But
Yeah.
there's like a couple of moments where they go so over the top with how he's staring at like Amy, where he's like, I mean, it's actually one of the things that I remembered bizarrely because I'd forgotten so much of this movie. I'd forgotten Ed entirely, so that was a nasty shock. But one of the things that I did remember is I vividly remembered, for whatever reason, from watching this in my teens, of the vampire kind of like just staring and walking through like a dance floor, like back and forth as he stares
Yeah.
the entire time. For whatever reason, that visual stuck in my head for the last 15 years, but that stuck out to me. I do,
Well,
I do,
that's
I do enjoy his performance though. I do like the vampire. I think his performance is quite likable. Well, not likable. That's not the word. But
yeah.
like he's charismatic. He's a little cheesy, but not too cheesy.
And like you can kind of see how like he can get one up on people. Like I like when he's talking to the I think like the first time like early on when he's like talking to the police and he has kind of his I don't know friend or whatever with them, and they're treating everything very silly, like, oh yeah, sure, I'm a vampire, whatever you say. And like you can kind of see how people would maybe like believe him or kind of think he's like a little charming.
Yeah, no, I think his charisma adds a lot to the movie. But maybe another movie to compare it to would be Vamp, which is another 80s vampire
Sure.
movie that I think, from what I remember, watching that a few times, is that also didn't necessarily have the most likable characters for the most part. But maybe that made up for it more in the style, because there was a lot of fancy lighting in that movie. There was maybe a lot more, actual. Well, I can't say there's a lot more gore. There's actually a couple of grisly practical effects towards the end of this.
Yeah.
It's just kind of held back until the last like 20 minutes, but I think that's maybe a more interesting comparison in terms of what sort of level we're dealing with here in terms of overall quality, I suppose.
Sure.
Yeah. I might side with Vamp a little bit overall though, probably just because of the style stuff. But
Yeah. No, I like Vamp quite a bit. And yeah, I would say if I had to choose between these, I'd probably go to that. I think like Lost Boys is probably another one people kind of compare it to. I don't know, but yeah, it's a I don't know, like yeah, for me, like it doesn't really light my fires, I guess, and I'm not like, oh, this is like a seminal 80s horror movie, but I do think it is pretty solid and fun. Like yeah, the characters aren't great, but like you do get kind of caught up in the whole situation, and I do kind of like that like you're saying, like the rear window aspect. Like I like the idea of like, oh, this thing is right next door but no one believes you, and like there's nothing you can do about it, and you just seem like you're going like crazier and crazier. And then yeah, like I do think there's like some actually pretty good like special effects. Like you said, it's kind of saved towards the end, but again, like it's like, always really nice to see like actual practical, stuff going on.
Well, I mean, it's the 80s, so it was bound to be practical
Obviously, yeah,
for the most part. Maybe the odd optical trick, but nothing too fancy. No, I'm kind of in a similar boat, and I think it's actually a decent, solid, fun time. I enjoyed watching it, and it definitely is of the era that I appreciate kind of the charm that it's going for and what it has. But it does kind of fall flat compared to a couple of other movies from the era in the sense that it doesn't necessarily have quite the likable characters. In fact, in one example, it has a completely detestable one. And then, but it has great music, it has style. I think the villain adds a lot to this. I think Roddy McDowall does add a lot. I think the idea of this actor who's just been fired, who is kind of past his prime and remembers his youth, getting the chance to actually... It's almost like a precursor in some ways to Galaxy Quest. I mean, you think about it. This idea of this vampire movie actor who is a bit of is a washed up old article now. No one cares about him, but he has a chance to kind of prove his worth by actually helping with a real vampire, and some of that I think is kind of endearing.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, no, he's a very interesting aspect to it. I feel like there's a weird thing in like these type of movies. I feel like when like something like Supernatural or whatever is going on, and then people like lean towards like books or comic books or movies for the information, which I just think is kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a funny trope where it's like, all right, if if I did think someone like was like a vampire, like would I really be like, oh, you know who I should talk to? The horror movie host. Like, they'll know about...
No, I agree. It's kind of a silly idea that happens a lot. I don't mind as much as a kid, because in Back to the Future, when Marty arrives and they think it's an alien, and the kid's like, look, it's just like my comic book. Like, I'm cool with the kid thinking that, because he's a kid.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but when... an adult, well, it's not an adult in this case, it's like a 16, 17-year-old, but, supposedly a 17-year-old, but he's like 20. But, with someone of that age, is like, no, I'll go to the horror actor. He'll know what to do.
Well, like, I mean, yeah, like, it would be like if, some, like, random person, like, emailed us and was like, guys, I think my house is haunted. What should I do? We'd be like... I don't know.
I don't know. Say a Hail Mary, shit in the porch.
Shit in the porch, what? Okay.
Alright, fine. Sacrifice a goat. There you go. I think that'll do it.
I mean, I think you're bringing you're just asking for more demons at that point.
But... dear. Alright, so I think we'll give the spoiler warning so we can talk about all the events of the movie and favourite scenes and all that sort of stuff. So I'll take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you. Well, I'll say for the month. At the time of recording, because we're recording all these very much in advance. So at the end of the episode, the video version will have the up-to-date producer credits on the video. But obviously, recording-wise, I have to say what we have at the time. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Board Now, Al Tribesman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams, and David Brown. They are our Patreon producers at the time of recording, and that means they are $20 or more on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, but you can of course support us for much less than that. You can get bonus exclusive episodes for $1 per month, and there's a whole back catalogue there. You can of course also get early access to the show at the $5 tier, and voting rights and stuff like that. So go and have a look and see if you're interested. And if you can't do any of that, do not feel bad or worry, because you can of course hit the like button on YouTube, which is a big sign of support, and it lets YouTube know that we're worth recommending out to other people, along with commenting and subscribing and rating us on iTunes with a positive rating, obviously 5 stars, good review. So there you go. That's my plugging done for the middle of the show.
Sure.
So full spoilers then for Fright Night. So yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned earlier, we kind of start off the movie with meeting Charlie and Amy, and they're seemingly on the cusp of having sex, but not quite there. And he's basically whining. He's like, "Oh, we've been together for a year, and all you ever say is stop, Charlie, stop." Which is a really like, if she's having to say stop, Charlie, stop a lot, maybe reconsider your actions a little bit. But then she's like, okay, and she takes off her top, and she's getting, she's like psyching herself up in the bed, sitting there in her bra, ready to go, and Charlie starts to like notice like two guys like moving a coffin in next door. It's like, well, Charlie, are we going to make love or not? Yeah, wait a minute. There's the coffin good on.
Now, see, this aspect I actually do like. Like, I like the guy. Like, I like the idea where, all right, the girl actually wants to, like, you know, make out or have sex or whatever, but the guy is too caught up in, like, the vampire stuff to worry about it.
I think
Like,
I would think it's funnier later. I think here in this opening scene, when all he's seen is a coffin, like, because, like, you know, a
Yeah.
couple, you know, like the next day or whatever, 2 days time, when he's seen more evidence and he's actually starting to become obsessed, I think that would be quite funny.
Sure.
I think here it came across to me as really unrealistic that any teenage boy in this moment would be like, there's something mildly interesting outside my window. I'm going to choose not to have the sex that has been offered to me on a silver platter. I don't quite buy it.
That's true.
But so she gets mad and leaves. Well, she tries to kind of like be nice to him like multiple times, but he keeps just kind of ignoring her and looking through the window. I did get a laugh though, because when they come downstairs, I can't remember what the line is that they say, something about making love, or like you keep changing your mind if you want to make love to me or something like that. But they yell it kind of out loud, and then Charlie's mum just goes, "Oh, hey kids." Just kind of awkwardly. And I was like, okay, that was pretty funny. I feel like that's a sort of joke you could update and make it really you'll go even further with it. Like, just have them walk down and say, like, you know, Charlie, you know I don't like it up the ass. Then the mum just going, hey kids.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll have to see. Maybe they did something like that in the remake.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Or the sequel, which
I guess if they're gonna update something like that, they'd probably talk about eating ass. I guess that's what the kids like nowadays. They say.
How do you do, fellow kids? I don't know. Is that what they talk about these days?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole thing about eating ass people are talking about for a while. I don't keep up to date with that stuff.
You don't keep up to date with the ass eating? Okay.
Not really. No.
Tim's like, he's got ass eating monthly just tucked under his nightstand.
Sure.
He takes it out and reads all the latest news.
Yeah. Very few publications I still get in the mail, but yeah, that's one of them.
So yeah, it was the Interest Evil Ed. Charlie kind of like snoops around the house a little bit, and like there is a human character who I took as the familiar character. There's like a human who's helping Jerry the vampire, which I got a little confused towards the end, because in the last like chunk of the movie he does actually end up getting like staked and like reacting as if he's a vampire. So I don't know if that's saying that he just got turned into a vampire in that last night, or if
I wasn't sure about that, because he's definitely like around during the day earlier in the movie. So I kind of just assumed the same thing, like, oh yeah, this is familiar, takes care of his stuff during the day that he can't or whatever, and then by the end of the movie he's basically treated like one of the bad guys, like full-on vampire guy.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that bugged me a little bit, is that when vampires die in this movie, they all seem to die in different ways. What I don't mean is the cause of death. I mean, when a vampire gets staked in this movie, like, one kind of melts, one kind of more like mutates and turns to dust, and like, I don't know. It's like there's a lot of differences in how they seem to die. It was a bit inconsistent, I thought.
Yeah, I guess it didn't bother me that much, because I thought it did like always look pretty cool when it happened.
No, it did. To be fair, it did. So... They all look good.
They also have like a pretty big range of powers. Like they're not just like strictly the human-esque vampires. Like they could turn to wolves and bats and stuff, and like they can get kind of like monstrous looking, which it's cool. I always like the kind of more crazier demony power kind of vampires.
Yeah, it's definitely always on the slight campy side, and that's fine, because that's what the movie's going for. This is not trying to be Nosferatu. It's not trying to be, even something as stylish as Near Dark or something like that. It's going for
Dracula, Dead and Loving It.
Yes. So, But as the movie progresses, we have this thing where he's seeing more and more things. He tries to tell the police because he witnesses a woman. Well, he sees a woman go into the house early on because he kind of like, again, he's been a little bit on the pervy side. This attractive woman sort of says, "Hey, is this 99 Oaks Lane or whatever it was?" And he's like, "No, that's next door." And she's like, "Thank you," and smells at him, and he's sort of like staring her up and down as he walks away. He's like, "Oh," he's like, he's all excited. But then later on that night, he sees the vampire with another woman, and he sees the vampire's teeth come out, and the vampire does close the blind before the actual murder itself. But then later on that night,
good idea.
I mean, yes, admittedly that's true. But then later on that night, he witnesses the vampire and the assistant like dragging out what looks like a body, like a corpse, in like a bag. And he tries to go and like spy on that outside under the bushes and gets caught again. Like this was just a running trend early on in the movie for me, is that Charlie keeps trying to spy on him, and every time he gets caught, like every time the vampire ends up looking right at him and being like,
"You're pretty bad at it."
Yeah, he's terrible.
I do like this kind of this like first scene here where he's like hiding in the bushes, and the vampires like you think he notices him, but you're not sure, and then you kind of by the end of the scene like, oh yeah, he totally knows that he's there. But I thought it was actually some good tension there.
What did you think of the choice to have the vampire have an affinity for fruit? Because he's constantly eating fruit all movie.
I mean, I thought it was fine. I don't know, the like I guess if you're gonna go by like the what we do in the shadows rules, where vampires can't ingest food, they automatically like just throw it up.
Oh, I didn't have a problem with it. I just thought it was an interesting choice to to have him like constantly eating a piece of fruit. It was like,
yeah,
this is weird. I'm not used to vampires in movies constantly eating something that isn't people.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like I don't know. It can be kind of intimidating, like when you're looking at someone, you just take like a big old bite of an apple. That can be like a little, I don't know, a little alpha male-y, I guess. But I mean, it does kind of beg the question, though. Like, I mean, if he is able to eat and ingest food, like, is he able to get nutrients from it? And if so, like, then why do they need blood? I don't know.
If you happen to have like an apple on hand, Tim, you can go get. I'll happily accept doing the thumbnail pose after we record, so that you can go and in an alpha male manner bite into the apple on screen.
And unfortunately, that's a forbidden fruit in our household. We don't have any.
Why is apples a forbidden fruit?
Because it's the original forbidden fruit.
I didn't realize that you and the missus were so deeply religious. Oh,
very much so.
Yes. I suspect lies. So he tries to inform the police. The police, the guy does come out. The actor, who I think is from Die Hard 2, if I remember correctly, and he gets into the house, but he doesn't really find it. And as soon as Charlie kind of reveals that he thinks he's a vampire, it all kind of goes to shit. No one believes him. They all think he's an idiot. And basically, like, there's kind of like a moment here where you can really see it coming, but I don't mind this because it's kind of an obvious thing to do, where he finds out, because he goes to Evil Ed, who for some reason he thinks Evil Ed will have vampire advice, and he pays him $8 for his vampire advice, which is how to combat a vampire. So garlic, holy water, blah blah blah, usual stuff. And a vampire can never enter unless they're invited. And I immediately just sort of in my head went, well, I bet his mum invites him in, because his mum like kind of had a line earlier on about I hope he's handsome or something. She had a line like that way back at the start of the movie.
Yeah, she's a little horny for him for sure.
Yeah, a little thirsty, as the kids say. Yes.
Sure.
So since we're in the business this episode of discussing things that the kids say, but there's a thing where you get shouted down. It's like, hey honey, I've got someone for you to meet. And it's like, this is our neighbor, and it's just look in Charlie's face. And what I did think was funny in this movie, though, is that this scene included, there's a lot of scenes where the vampire will be in the scene with Charlie, and there'll be other characters there who don't believe that what Charlie thinks, right? but the vampire will have like all these weird pauses where he's clearly being kind of intimidating, and no one in the room will like sort of acknowledge it or pick up on it or address the fact that he's having these weird like open-ended questions where he's like, you know, like because in this scene, for example, you know, he's like, oh, now that I've been invited over, you know, I'll come by often,
and it says like, in fact, whenever I want. And it's like, even if you don't think or know that he's a vampire, it's still a pretty creepy thing to say.
Yeah, but then after like 5 seconds of like a pause after he says that, he goes, oh, with your mother's permission, of course. Like, but it's like, I mean, there's just this long pause where he's just staring at Charlie, like, just to intimidate him. And I'm like, is no one noticing the body language and the mood in the room, really? Because it happens a lot. It happens again later when they all come over to the vampire's house with the actor, but it was something I was picking up on this.
Yeah, and I think I mean, this is one of the things I think that kind of makes the movie is I really like this dynamic of, you know, and it's not necessarily anything new, but I just think it works pretty well where it's like, all right, you know, he's the bad guy, you know, the main character knows it and is onto him, but you know that everyone else is like thinks he's crazy, and yeah, it's just like the interesting choice where it's like, all right, yeah, like they're kind of like at a stalemate. I mean, maybe not. I mean, maybe the vampire has way more power, but like, yeah, you know, like just no matter like what he says or do, he's just always gonna come off as like being like crazy or hysterical.
Yeah. And I want to make it clear, I'm not really complaining about this. I actually started to really enjoy the fact that no one acknowledged like how much of a weird tension and creepiness there was going on right in front of them. You know, it became almost cartoonish that no one was addressing or even reacting to anything that was being said that was this creepy, like, I don't know if passive aggressive this is the right phrase in this case, but this like sort of clear tension that was in the room. But anyway, that night he comes into the house to try and kill Charlie and struggles when Charlie stabs him in the hand with a pencil, and this is enough to kind of make him retreat. So he actually does manage to stave him off just a little bit, and obviously Charlie's terrified, and he goes to the actor for help. He's like, look, he's going to come back and try and kill him again tonight. I did appreciate them using the day-night cycle as kind of like a mechanical thing where, okay, it's daytime, he's got a day to plan and try and figure things out and try and get help and try and address what he's doing. And I think it's around this point where he tells his friends, you know, and by friends I mean Amy and Evil Ed, if he can be classed as such a friend.
I forget if do we ever find out why he's called Evil? Because he really hates the nickname, but I don't know. I don't think they ever give an explanation as to why he has it.
I don't think so. I don't remember any explanation. I remember just him calling him Evil and then him being like, "Don't call me that."
Yeah, it's very strange because it doesn't even. I don't even think it's like a very good nickname. Like it's a very, I don't know. It sounds weird. Like because yeah, he just calls him just Evil. Like I mean, Evil Ed sounds a bit better, but yeah, I don't know. It's strange.
All it makes me think is a certain other film. I'm evil.
Sure. Yeah.
Check out our review of the New Year's Evil for the full scoop on that reference.
Then I think I might be confusing this with something else, but I think like Evil Ed. There's like, isn't there like a comic book called that or something? Is it Evil Ernie? Maybe, I don't know.
I don't think this is the first time I've ever heard the name Evil Ed. I think Evil Ed is a thing from something. I couldn't tell you what though.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean you could do it with any name beginning with E. Evil Ernest, Evil.
Oh no, not Ernest.
Evil Albert.
Sure.
Evil. I'm running out of names with E. Eugene. No, that doesn't work. Well, technically beginning with an E doesn't actually work for the alliteration. I don't know. Anyway, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff that sort of goes on in this part of the movie, but it kind of boils down to the friends can go to the actor and try and convince him to help, just to prove to Charlie that nothing is going on. They want to go to the vampire with Charlie, because this is the thing, like the vampire and he's like a helper, like, oh, we don't even have to go and hunt Charlie tonight. It turns out he's coming over tomorrow night. Like, his friends are bringing him over to prove that there's nothing wrong. So they all come in together. And I referred to this as Chekhov's mirror because before they go, there's a moment with the actor where he's showing off, oh, I've still got this prop from the movie. This is the mirror that I used to prove that someone was the vampire in this fake movie I was in. And I was like, okay, so that's Chekhov's mirror. That mirror is going to be used to show, because he comes in and he's like, okay, we're going to test if he's a vampire. I've got holy water, claiming that it was actually blessed. And Charlie's doubtful, quite rightly. Like, how do you know for sure that this was real holy water? This could just be water in a little vial. You have no idea. You don't know. There could be anything. And
sure.
He, he drinks the holy water, and everyone's like, well, that's that settled then. There is a lot of stuff here, though, that starts off with the creepy vampire clearly trying to seduce Amy, who, as far as the movie's concerned, is a teenage girl. And obviously this is a trope that's in a lot of vampire stuff. What I thought was especially weird about this, though, is he kind of starts doing it in front of like everyone else, including her boyfriend and this aging actor who, as an adult, should probably be like, hey, maybe don't creepily kiss the teenage girl in the hand. A little bit odd. But
yeah. Well, he has like a fixation on her because like she reminds him of like a past love or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a painting they've got of like someone from like, centuries ago that looks exactly like her. And to the point where they made such a big deal of it, I thought they were going to do like, oh, she is the reincarnated, Mrs. Vampire. But they never quite go that far with it. It's just that she happens to look like her. But of course, there's a moment where they're leaving and the actor has the mirror out, and he's not because he's checking anything, just because he's looking at himself, and he happens to notice that there's no reflection of the vampire, and he doesn't actually try to help at that point. He just gets freaked out and leaves. He just runs. He's determined to leave. And Charlie is like, yo, you saw something that made you believe. He's like, no, I'm going, leave me alone. So he runs off. And the movie just kind of escalates from here because the three of the kids are walking Amy home, and they're walking through the street, and Evil Ed kind of breaks off because he tries to like give them a fright by like pretending to be like attacked in the alleyway, but then they piss off and leave him there, and then he actually does get attacked in the alleyway by the vampire, and is very quickly turned into a vampire because the vampire goes after the other two. He goes after Charlie and Amy right after this, and it's the same night. He's just followed them, and they're maybe like 5 minutes away from where they were before when they left him in the alleyway. And at the same time, Evil Ed, as a vampire who has now been sired and is now a vampire, goes to the actor to attack the actor. And that he's already so I was like, oh wait, so there's no siren time. He doesn't have to be like dead for a night and like wake up in the grave. He doesn't have to he just, no, that's it, instant, you're a vampire now. Within seconds, essentially.
And he seems to have like the hang of it pretty well. Like I forget if it's this scene right away or maybe the scene after, but like he can transform into a wolf. Like,
oh, that's a little bit later, but yeah.
But like, yeah, you think that would like need some like time to kind of like figure that stuff out or learn to do that.
Yeah, no low learning curve apparently on the vampires in this one. This actually leads me to one of the things that really I really thought was odd. So there's an arc later on for the movie where the actor Peter Vincent, he holds up a crucifix or a cross to the main vampire, and the main vampire just like grabs it and crushes it and says, "You have to believe for that to work," or something to that effect, right? You have to like actually have faith in it to. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, like if you if you're using like these kind of religious icons as weapons, you do have to have actual like faith in them for it to work, which I think I've seen done in other stuff. I don't know if this is the first to kind of use that logic, but I feel like that's a thing that I've seen other like books or movies adapt.
And I don't have this is a fine mechanic. I have no problem with this because there's an obvious arc here to do where later on, right at the end of the movie, he uses up he holds up the cross again and it does work. And he says something, I don't remember what the line is, but he says something to the, that sort of hits home the idea that he does now believe and that now it works. And like, that's a fine arc. My problem with this is that in this scene, before any of that happens with Ed, he uses a cross on Ed and it works. So, so when it got to the point where he holds up the cross and it doesn't work with the main vampire, all I could think was, wait, so he did believe, and then he used it and it worked on Ed, and now he doesn't believe because it worked? That's a weird thought process.
Yeah, yeah, that's a little confusing. I don't know if it's like, maybe if it has anything to do with Ed being such like a new vampire, if, maybe, I don't know, there's something like, as a vampire, you have to know if someone has faith or not, or if you have, I don't know, faith that it's gonna work, or you're afraid it's gonna work. I don't know. That's probably just putting more thought into it than they actually did.
It's very murky, because I have no problem, because I think if you take out him using the cross on Ed, I think the arc later on where he doesn't believe it doesn't work, and then he does believe and it works, and it's this big triumphant moment for him, it's him believing in himself, maybe more than anything. I think that works really well as a little character beat, but because he uses a cross earlier on and it works, and then it doesn't work afterwards, it's kind of a weird, like, thing. And I get what you're saying, maybe like, oh, because he's a new vampire, he's more susceptible to it regardless. I think if they could somehow get that point across, that would be okay. Sure. But it's maybe adding like one layer too many to like the rules for this.
Totally, yeah.
Because I think alternatively, if you took out the faith thing and you told me it works on Ed because he's new, it doesn't work on the main vampire because he's basically built up an immunity to it over centuries, and he's like, he's trained himself to not give a shit and to withstand the pain and not care. Like, that would have been fine too. I'd have bought that. Like, this idea that he's, the idea that the older you get, the stronger you get as a vampire, and therefore these weaknesses become less and less effective. I could buy that too. But as it is, it's a little bit murky. But of course, then the vampire chases Amy and Charlie, who he keeps kind of appearing round the corners whenever. And again, this is when all the guitar would come in. Whenever he walked around the corners, like really cool. But we end up with this scene in the dance club where somehow the vampire has changed clothes, because now he's in like a sweater. He was in like something else when he was outside. But he comes in, and while Charlie's on the phone, this is the scene I was talking about earlier, where he's like walking through the crowd in the dance floor, and he's just staring at her the whole time. There is a couple of neat moments here though, where there's like a reflection, and he kind of disappears because he's going like past the mirror, and we're seeing the reflection instead of him, so we don't see him in the shot. It leads to her being glamoured out into the dance floor, where she dances with him very intently. I think the reason why this scene exists is because they wanted to have her, like, because there's like a big mirror, one of the walls is a big mirror, and they wanted to have a scene where she's like dancing with no one in the reflection, like, spinning around the dance floor. Sure. Which I get why they want to do it, and it looks alright. It is a little bit like, I think you can kind of tell a little bit that the actress is just kind of pretending.
Sure.
And it feels like there's a weightlessness to it, and that's a hard thing to like get right and like convince me that there's actually a person there that we just can't see. There's a skill in that not everyone can pull off, so I wouldn't be too harsh on it. But
sure.
So he steals Amy away and says, you'll show up with the actor later or Amy will die, basically. So he has to go to the actor, he has to convince the actor to actually help him. So they gear up, crucifixes, holy water, stakes, all the rest of it, and they come to the house. And it is pointed out that they have to save her by sundown, or she's lost forever. This is one of these things that I'm not a big fan of in vampire movies, because she does get sired. Like, we have this kind of erotic scene with the vampire and Amy where he sires her, and she does become a vampire, which for some reason makes her hair grow out. I don't know why, but it does.
Sure.
But it's one of these things where, like, okay, if you kill the vampire that sired her, she magically becomes human again at the end. It did set it up to be, because I was complaining as I was watching it on stream last night, and it was pointed out to me, they did kind of set it up with a line of dialogue that if they kill him before sunrise, that it would be fine. And I'm like, okay, fine, but I'm not in love with the idea of magically becoming human again. Once you're a vampire, you're a vampire. None of these like magic get out of jail free cards. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have too hard of a stance on it. Yeah, I mean, I guess it is probably important that like they do kind of set up the rules so that you know exactly what you're dealing with. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, from here there's a lot of stuff, but them creeping about the house, fighting the vampire, fighting the assistant who's also a vampire now. Who I have to assume he wasn't earlier because he was walking around outside, but whatever.
See, I kind of like all this stuff because it's like I like the idea of like you know, like setting up all these different little pieces and like having to have everything come together, and like, you know, we have like a group of good guys, we have a group of bad guys, and like, you know, everyone's kind of like off, like almost like, I don't know, video gamey or something, where it's almost like there's these like little mini bosses that like you know, people have to face
oh, for sure, yeah,
you know, before they get to the big bad.
Yeah, it feels like they're fighting their way to the main vampire because, you know, they have to deal with Ed, who admittedly the ending kind of reveals that he is actually alive, which is the most, you know, horrific idea. Apparently he's in the sequel. In fact, interesting tidbit on the actor who plays Evil Ed. Someone who was watching on stream pointed out that his IMDb, he did a lot of gay porn in the 90s. Okay. This actor, which, you know, whatever, no shaming here. But when I looked at the list of titles, because I was curious, I was very disturbed when one of them was, what was the word? Was it Gay After Midnight? I don't know. It was something after midnight, and I went, oh no, oh no, the porn parody of our podcast already exists. No.
Oh, and what Patreon level gets us to watch that?
I'm glad you said watch that. Oh dear. To quote a certain character from a certain video game, not enough cash, stranger. So but no, so yeah, we're here talking about this is the practical effects portion, really. We're talking about how because Ed turns into a wolf and he gets like staked with a, you know, like it's like a part of a fence or something, like a wooden fence, but he gets
it's because they're inside the house, so I think it was like part of he does that thing, maybe? Yeah, they do that thing, which I think is kind of funny because this happens in like every vampire thing where someone gets thrown into like either a wooden table or a wooden chair or wooden fence, and it like just so very conveniently like breaks into like stakes.
Do you know what? I will give the wooden fence a pass because at least that has kind of a sort of spiky formation anyway. So if they land like, you know, flat on the spikes of the fence, I mean, admittedly, would they actually penetrate like flesh, or would you just break your back and fall over? I don't know. Yeah, they're not that sharp. But anyway, but we get this like sort of transformation from wolf back into human form as he's like seemingly dying. He's not actually dying because he's alive at the end, but it's actually a really good it's kind of like a reverse werewolf transformation. It looks quite good, I have to say.
Yeah, and I like it because, you know, I always do feel bad when they you know, kill an animal in a horror movie, but at least it's like, okay, well, it's not really you know, he's back to being a human, so I don't feel as bad, but I think as annoying and as grating as Evil Ed is, I do think this performance is actually kind of like I don't know, I do feel sad for him here when he's like turning back into a human. He's kind of like whimpering and like has like a tear like coming down his face. Like, I don't know, something about it I just kind of pity him and feel bad about.
I don't. The assistant's death turns out to be a vampire now too. He straight up has like this over the top like melting effect, which is again visually quite impressive. It looks really good. You know, you see like, you know, has like it's like green ooze is like melting from him, and then like the entire face kind of melts, and you see the skull. I think by the end of it, the actual skull kind of like slides down the floor like towards them by the time it's all done. Very, 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 very distinct, I'll say.
Yeah, I know. I definitely dig it.
It felt like I'm trying to think of like a movie to compare it to. It felt, I guess, a little Evil Dead, but that wasn't. I feel like there's a better comparison to make. I don't know.
Street Trash.
Actually, that's not a bad one, actually. Street Trash. Remember we did Street Trash 10? That was like 3 years ago. Time does fly.
Of course. Yeah.
So
How can I forget that movie?
I know. So obviously he's very disturbed that Amy's a vampire when he finds her. And there's a lot of creeping around. I did laugh though. At one point it cut to an exterior of the house, and there's literally like fog and smoke coming from like every edge of the house, and I'm like, all right, you might have overdone it a little bit with the fog machines, okay, right? A little bit much.
A little bit.
But of course, like sunrise is coming, so it's all about them trying to like smash them. It ends up with them down in the basement. By the way, this basement has more windows in it than I think I've ever seen in a basement in my life. But
sure.
they essentially start breaking all the windows they've all been blacked out earlier in the movie, but they start smashing them all so the sunlight comes in. Until of course,
and that's like another extremely like tropey vampire thing, which I probably feel like I'm complaining too much, but again, it's just I feel like you've seen this so many times in vampire movies where it's like, oh no, like everything's lost, there's nothing we can do, and then wait a minute, like something goes flying through a window and reveals like just like this beam of sunlight, and then it's like, oh hey,
yeah, which is why it's actually parodied in episode 2 of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where she smashes the window and like a beam of light comes in, and Luke the vampire's kind of like and then he sort of realizes that there's nothing wrong, goes wait what, and then Buffy just like stakes him from behind and goes, sunrise is in about 4 hours more on, and he dies. Pretty funny. It's just a quality moment. Yeah. Well, I think that the key point there, because you mentioned that we're complaining a little bit about some of these overly tropey moments. I think it is worth mentioning that this is definitely not trying to be. I mean, this wants to be a tropey vampire movie. This wants to be just this. All this wanted to do was take the tropey vampire style story and put it into an 80s teen movie. That's what this movie is. It's not like other movies like we've done Near Dark in the past, or we're going to do some other ones this month that are trying to be different. It's not trying to be let the right one in and do like something that's more transformative and more like, no, let's do a serious take on a vampire story. This doesn't want to be that. This wants to be kind of old school and campy and harken back to those things. And I think inherently, it's less interesting to us because of that, because I think we are a fan of like our more serious vampire movies for the most part.
I mean, if given the choice, usually like the serious ones. But I mean, I'm definitely not against like having a fun campy one, and I think this one does succeed on this level. I mean, even like the title, like Fright Night, like it does feel kind of like what it's named after, which is those like horror host movie night kind of things where you would watch something like this that has a lot of tropes and fog and kind of thing. So it's I think it succeeds in that kind of funness, even if you're looking at stuff that you've seen a million times before. But I mean, also this is from the 80s. I mean, maybe at that time stuff might have not been as big of tropes. I don't know.
I think it probably was. Just because the stuff that's troping stuff from the 50s. It's troping stuff from these previous decades. Sure. No, I do agree though that it kind of succeeds mostly at what it's actually trying to be, and I think the actual critiques that I would give it, because as much as we're kind of poking fun at some of these vampire tropes and we're poking fun at some of these moments are what make the movie fun. Like I don't want to be harsh on them, because some of these moments are why I kind of chuckled and went, oh, that's kind of fun, or cute or whatever. The actual critiques I would give the movie would maybe be that it's just a touch too long. And also, generally, what I've been saying about the characters is that I don't necessarily find the main characters that likable. And then, of course, Evil Ed is actually like awful. He's terrible. He's the worst.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really argue with that, too much.
Yeah. So that's basically the movie. We end the movie like we started with. She's back to normal, and they're making out in the bed. There's a moment where he gets distracted for a second, but then he gets back to kissing. His arc in the movie is that he's learned to not let his sexy times get interrupted, and we just see like a glimmer of light from the other building, and we hear the Evil Ed laugh, which does not make me encouraged about Fright Night 2, which I have never seen, might I add.
I actually watched Fright Night 2 actually pretty, I think maybe like either the same day or the next day after watching this, because I'd never seen it either, and it's like impossible to find. But I mean, there's some places you can find, but Yeah, this is strange. I didn't really take this to mean that Evil Dead was alive. I kind of just thought that they were just, I don't know, they're just reusing the line at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know if that's a fact that he's alive. I don't think he's in the second movie.
Was it not?
Maybe if I don't know if he had a small part and I missed it. I don't think he is. I'll tell
Alright.
you. I'll tell you who is in the second movie, and that's Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. uh,
Well, okay. Okay. And if I remembered Napoleon Dynamite at all, I'd remember who that is. But
hey, a lot of people remember that movie. That's it's a classic for my generation.
I saw it the year it came out and did not care for it, and have forgotten absolutely almost all of it. Hey, what?
I don't know. I'm not going to defend Napoleon Dynamite. It is what it is. You like it or you don't. But yeah, he's John Grease plays a very entertaining vampire in it. And the second one I believe is directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who of course, I want to say he did the 6th Friday the 13th movie, if I'm remembering correctly.
I'm going to go check. He directed Halloween 3.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Hold on. He's worked with a lot of Junker because he worked on Halloween. He wasn't the director, obviously, of Halloween, but he did work on Halloween.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of that instead of Friday the 13th.
Let me check here. So he did Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. He did Fright Night Part 2, of course. Did a bunch of TV stuff. Did some TV movies. I honestly didn't really do much after that in terms of actual movies.
Alright, then Halloween 3 must have been what I was thinking of then.
What we haven't mentioned is that the director of Fright Night is none other than Spider-Man himself, Tom Holland. At the age of negative, 20, or whatever it works out as. Now, Tom Holland, of course, we're talking about Tom Holland to go on to direct Child's Play.
Child's Play, yeah.
Yeah, so that's some credit. I mean, this is probably his second biggest horror movie then, or just biggest movie in general, probably, now I think about it. Because, I don't know, did Tom Holland going to do much after these?
Not off the top of my head. I'm going to assume probably did some TV stuff.
I'm checking. Yeah, a lot of TV stuff. He did a movie called Thinner in the 90s.
Oh, Stephen King movie? That's right, yeah.
He did a movie called The Temp. But again, he did Fright Night and Child's Play, and then it seems like everything after that was not as notable or important.
Sure.
So that's a shame. He did some Tales from the Crypt episodes, but I guess that's not surprising. And
yeah, so, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I know. That's interesting. So I feel sorry for him because now he's just going to be. The joke is always going to be that this is Spider-Man that's directed right now. Even though he wasn't even I mean, Spider-Man's parents were probably teenagers when this came out. By Spider-Man, I mean Tom Holland's parents were probably teenagers when this came out. That's what I meant. What if Amy and Charlie are Tom Holland's parents?
I mean, it could happen. I mean, Spider-Man's no stranger to vampires for sure. So,
and obviously they moved to England at some point before he was born, and that's why Tom Holland has an English accent. That's why.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah. I'll be honest. Because we had Marcy from Married with Children in this, I was kind of thinking at a couple of points that I was like, this movie would be even better if the vampire was Al Bundy.
Yeah. Hey, I'd watch it. That doesn't sound too bad.
Food for thought. That's all I'm saying. Just think about it, people. Think about it. All right. Okay. I we're at the ratings then, and final thoughts. Tim, what you give it?
I'm gonna give it a 7.5. I do like it quite a bit, and it's again, it's kind of weird because this isn't like a classic that I grew up with. So I haven't seen it like a ton, but I do watch it every maybe like every couple of years or so, and every time I do watch it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is like a really fun, enjoyable movie. But I think it is just missing a few key ingredients, like you kind of you already went over, that just kind of keep it from being like a seminal 80s must watch, and instead is just like, okay, yeah, like a pretty fun, good time. So yeah, 7.5 for me. It's yeah, it's good, but it's just missing a few things to keep it from being like great or even amazing or anything like that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with straight 7 out of 10 for me. I think it's a good movie that it fulfills a lot of what it's trying to do. It's sort of that prime 80s era. It ticks a lot of those boxes. It made me laugh quite a number of times. I enjoyed the music a lot. The style it was kind of going for, even if it's not necessarily nothing about this is my favorite of anything. Like, it's not my favorite take on vampires. It's not my favorite 80s teen movie or teen horror movie. It's not my favorite. Like, everything is like, I think. Sometimes there'll be these cult movies, and I think Near Dark's a great one to compare it to, because Near Dark is also not one that is like hit the mainstream in the way where everyone knows what Near Dark is. Like, horror fans know what Near Dark is, and horror fans gave it a cult following. And I think when it comes to cult following movies, sometimes you see it and you click with it, and you are part of what gives it the cult following. And I think with Near Dark, like that, when I saw that movie, I freaking loved it, and it's like, I think it's one of the best vampire movies there is, and I'm like a big champion of it, and I'm one of the idiots for that one who'll say, no, you have to see this is underappreciated, you have to see it. I think Fright Night, I'm not quite in that camp, and all I mean by that is that I think it's good, but I wouldn't like go out of my way to say you have to see Fright Night. It's it's this quintessential vampire stuff. It's like, if you've already seen all the best ones, this is a solid little B movie to kind of follow up with and have some fun with. So it's good.
Yeah. Especially like the fact that it's like I mean, I think both of us are pretty huge fans of like these 80s horror movies, and there's so many from this decade that are just like stone cold classics that are so much fun and that you watch like over and over again. And yeah, like I can't really put this in the same camp as like some of the other like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Streets or
Shopping Mall.
Sure, Shopping Mall, what have you. But like it doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. But yeah, it's just not like the best or in the highest regard. But again, it's like one of those ones where whenever I do come back to it, I still have a good time. Like, it's I never dislike watching it or anything.
Yeah, no, it's a fun time. It's a fun time, and I get why it has found an audience, though. I get why there is like a contingency of the vampire fandom who gravitate towards this more than maybe the ones that we gravitate towards a bit more. But certainly can still appreciate it. And yeah, it's, if nothing else, it's a pretty easy watch. It's actually a really good. I don't want to say starter horror film, but like if you've got like a 12-year-old who's starting to get into horror, I think this is a fairly safe. I mean, there's boobs, but boobs,
Sure.
whatever. 12-year-olds are looking at boobs, all right. Just get over it. They've seen boobs already. But it's a fairly, not I wouldn't say like early child friendly, but it's definitely like I think you can graduate from like your Hocus Pocuses to your Fright Nights, kind of around that age, or maybe a little younger. I was probably younger. I didn't see Fright Night till a little bit later, but I was definitely seeing more extreme things in Fright Night by the age of 12.
Sure. Martyrs and stuff like that.
I mean, Martyrs came out, I think, when I was 17, so I mean, I think that's impossible, but but yes. So there you go. If you made it this far to the end of the review, you can put the word. I don't have to give me any like specific keywords in this. Let's simply put the word chilling in the comments if you made it this far in the review. I'll make Tim do his pose for the thumbnail, so here we go. 3, 2, 1, pose! I think this will be one where Tim's on the left so that his elbow's not covering my face this time. But maybe that'll be funny, I don't know. Maybe I'll just sort of creep behind his elbow.
Sure.
I'll try and do that thing where my hands up like that as if I'm like... So that is Fright Night. You can, of course, let us know what you think of the movie in the comments. We encourage you to do so. You can like and subscribe, as we mentioned earlier, as we did Patreon. Patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, so go and have a look at that too. You can catch us on Twitter at Screams Midnight. Look out for that. And if you weren't aware of it, pretty much everything that you're seeing in January, February, March, and probably April, maybe even a touch of May, is actually being pre-recorded because Tim is on paternity leave right now. I mean, right now we're looking at this schlub who has no idea what it is like being a father, but it's happening. It's happening around now. I mean, not really. This is out in January, and the baby's not due then. But you know, it doesn't matter.
I'll be
in general.
At this point, I will be taking classes and learning how to build
a cribs
and stuff. Yeah.
Tim will be on the floor with some instructions and a screwdriver, try to like make it all work. That's what you're doing now. Yes. Maybe this will be a thing. We'll try and predict what you're doing at this point in paternity leave at the end of the All right, that is Screams After Midnight. Thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.